Hades' Daughter, Chapter 8. Mesopotamia, Western Greece. Brutus climbed the street for a few more minutes, the way becoming ever steeper, and the houses on either side more palatial, until he came to what was clearly the northernmost point of the walls. Here the street ended in a wide court. High walls surrounded the semicircle court, behind which rose grand houses. All gates but one were tightly bolted against the coming night. To this gate Brutus turned, noting without surprise that it belonged to the house at the northernmost point of the walls. He approached, wondering what awaited him behind the darkened angle of the partly open solid wood gate. As he stepped up to the gate, there was a movement inside, and a servant emerged, his head bowed. "Have you figs for the master?" he said, his voice low. He spoke in Dorian Greek, a rough but easily understandable dialect of the sweeter southern language of the Peloponnese. "Aye," replied Brutus, using the code that had been passed to him. "But they are of unusual taste, having come from far away." The servant bowed, accepting his answer, then opened the door fully. Behind it waited a short man of solid build. He was in early old age, his face lined and his nose prominent amid the sunken cheeks. He was dressed plainly, his tunic of poor quality linen, but of a good cut, yet stood with the bearing of a man in authority. His gray hair was still thick, but was cut in an unusual fashion. The left side hung free, but only to his cheek, whereas the right side was braided and hung almost to his shoulder. Brutus, frowning over the hair, nevertheless knew immediately who he must be, and, knowing that, knew what the hairstyle signified. "Diamas," he said, and inclined his head. "You are Brutus," Diamas said, inclining his own head, although with noticeably less respect than Brutus had given him. "A Trojan, apparently. I welcome you to Mesopotamia, and to the house of Assaracus, who waits inside to greet you. You've intrigued us greatly with your arrival and the..." He paused, a small derisive smile playing about his mouth. "Tone of the greeting you sent me. It is a long time since I've heard such arrogance. Then perhaps my arrival is most timely indeed, Diamas, if you so forget your heritage. Now, I have walked far, and my feet and face are dusty. May I take advantage of the hospitality of the house?" In answer, Diamas stepped aside, indicating that Brutus should enter before him. The atrium of the house was welcoming, cool and well lit with oil lamps against the encroaching dusk. Rush mats, woven into intricate designs, had been spread across the stone floor, and the walls were painted with vivid blues, reds, and golds into scenes of rustic idyls. Just inside the entrance, and to one side, there was a small but finely built altar, and Brutus paused to make brief obeisance to the gods before he walked into the atrium proper. Diamas, having made his own respects to the deities, waved Brutus to a chair, where a young woman wearing a similar haircut to Diamas waited with 2 bowls of scented water, several vials of oils, and some thick towels. Brutus sat and allowed the woman to take off his sandals and place his feet into the first bowl of pleasantly warmed water. "This is a Dorian house," Brutus said to Diamas, as the woman carefully dried his feet before using her gentle hands to rub them with scented oils. "Why have you brought me here?" Diamas looked at him oddly, then looked pointedly at the woman, now washing Brutus' face and hands with water from the second bowl. Brutus looked at her, then back at Diamus. I would trust a fellow Trojan with my life, even though she be a stranger to me. The woman paused, staring at Brutus in surprise. He smiled at her. I know my fellow brothers and sisters by their blood, he said, by the arcs of their brows and the planes of their faces and the sweet curls of their hair. I'm glad to see you in good health, sister, although saddened by the cut. He touched the line of her short brown hair where it swung against her left cheek. Of slavery. Then perchance you will recognize me as a brother and not as a stranger of whom to be wary, said a new voice, and Brutus turned his eyes to the man who had emerged from one of the interior doorways. He was much younger than Diamus, but carried himself with even more authority. And why not? Thought Brutus, for unlike Diamus and the young woman, he carried no mark of slavery. The female slave, her cheeks now prettily stained with a little color, hurriedly finished drying Brutus's hands and face before backing away and exiting the room. You are Assaracus, Brutus said. Assaracus inclined his head. Aye, he said, I am he. Will you attend me and the dinner I have caused to be made in the andron of my house? Gladly, said Brutus, rising from his chair. The andron, or dining chamber, of Assaracus was truly magnificent. Its roofline rose fully the height of 3 men, supported by well-spaced and proportioned columns, and covered a large chamber whose walls had been painted with exquisite scenes of the gods' frolics, and Brutus was somewhat aggrieved to see, of some of the Greeks' most devastating victories. A poor view, Assaracus said, waving nonchalantly at the eastern wall that held an unmistakable depiction of Greeks ravaging the streets of Troy. But I hold as much excuse, only that this was my father's house before mine, and he enjoyed that view, while I do not. Please, now he waved at one of the several couches laid about the laden low table, take your ease. Now, he continued, as all 3 men each reclined upon a couch, you say that you are Brutus, of Aeneas lineage? Aye, said Brutus, accepting the cup of watered wine that Assaracus handed him, but declining to sip from it. He is my father twice removed. I am his heir, he paused, to all that Aeneas could claim. Now Brutus did sip from his cup of wine. And now you know of my lineage. Might I ask yours? Your features bear the unmistakable stamp of Troy. You associate with Diamus. You understand to speak for all Trojan slaves here in Mesopotamia, and yet you live in a Greek house painted with grewdy representations of Troy's ill fate. And you wear your hair in the Greek style, not in the style of slavery. I am curious. Careful. Hey. You okay? Want me to rub your back? There we go. Oh, what is this again?
What is that?
This is not good. Where is it coming from?
I think this one of the hair ties. I think this one of the
It's
little
part of
hair
your...
ties.
Okay, there we go. Oh, you are hot, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty warm. As you should be, Diamus. Perhaps you might answer for me. Assaracus is the son of my sister, Diamus said, his eyes cast down. Lavinia was most beautiful, and was thus taken as concubine to Assacarus' father. Thymbrasius. He so honored her that when she bore him a son, Diamus nodded at Assaracus. Thymbrasius caused the boy to be named as his heir, above the son of his Dorian wife. And thus my allegiance to Diamus and my mother's people, Assaracus said. I am well hated within Mesopotamia for my Trojan blood, and only my inherited wealth and the swords I can buy with that keep my person and home safe from harm. Assaracus saw the interest on Brutus' face at the mention of swords, and though he half smiled, preferred to ignore it for the moment. My true friends remain among my mother's people, Brutus, not with the Dorian Greeks of my father's lineage. Assaracus is our friend and ally, said Diamus, now helping himself to several spoonfuls of maza and some of the raw vegetables. In a world where we have few friends or allies. He paused, crunched on some celery, then said, as you must well know, does any Trojan have a friend or ally save among his own people? Brutus replied. I have heard, Diamus said slowly and very deliberately, that even your own people, your own family, turned against you after your father's untimely death. Brutus began, for which you were undoubtedly responsible, Diamus finished. My father's death was an accident, Brutus said. His voice remained even, but there was no doubt in either Diamus or Asacharis' mind that he was angry at the mention of his father's death. With your arrow through his eye, Assaracus said. He drained his wine cup and refilled it. But then you did think he was what was it? Ah, yes, a stag, Diamus said. Brutus said nothing, gazing back at the two men with a calm regard. The manner of his father's death was, in the end, nothing to do with them. And now, Assaracus interrupted, placing his wine cup down on the table so hard that red wine spilled across its surface. Having killed your father, accidentally or otherwise, then having been exiled from your home community for the act, and then having wandered only the gods know where for the next 15 years, you arrive on the coast of Epirus, and say to your fellow Trojans, I am your savior. I will lead you from the bondage of Troy. You are lucky, Brutus, that you even received the courtesy of an invitation to meet with Diamus and myself. I am my father's heir, and through him my great-grandfather's heir, Brutus said, his demeanor remaining cool. I am the heir to all that was lost at Troy. If you had not recognized that, then you would not have responded to my message. We could just have been curious, Diamus murmured, staring at the wine as he swirled it about his cup. Troy is dead and gone, Assaracus said, ignoring Diamus' remark. It is nothing but a rubble of smoking ash and broken dreams. There is nothing to be heir to. Claim what you want, Brutus. It means nothing to us. And do you say the same to these? Brutus said, and reaching for an ewer of water that stood to one side, wet a piece of linen and rubbed away the oil and ash that obscured the golden band on his left biceps. Very pretty, Assaracus muttered, but Diamus' eyes widened at the sight, and Brutus did not miss it. I say to you, Brutus said to the two men, that while there are still men who call themselves Trojans, then there is a Troy to be heir to. Not the old Troy, now he included both men in his gaze, but a new Troy. When I said that I would lead you into Troy, I meant not the ancient Troy, but a new one, alive with the hopes and dreams and the heritage of all those who still call themselves Trojans. And where might this new Troy be? Diamus said. His tone was aggressive, his manner confrontational, but Brutus thought he saw a gleam of desperate hope in the man's eye. Diamus wanted to believe, but could not yet find the means to do so. Not in this world, Brutus said. All the great cities of the Minoans, the Mycenaeans and the Trojans, and the Egyptians as well, for all I know, are now rubble. Troy, Atlantis, Knossos, Tarsus, Pylos, Iolcos, Thebes, Medea, and a score more that I could not name, or in a score more that I could name. They have been destroyed by invasion, by upheavals of the earth, and by fiery mountainous eruptions. What further can the gods do to voice their displeasure? It is time for a new beginning, and a new Troy, but one very, very far from here. Where? Said Diomedes softly. Where? The gods will show me. Diomedes threw up his hands, disbelief winning out, and Assaracus grunted derisively. I say to you again, Brutus, Assaracus said, what do you hear, saying you wish to lead your brethren to a new beginning? Why should anyone follow you? Because of my lineage. I was born to lead, and I have the right to claim my heritage. I am born of the god favored. My own great-grandmother was Aphrodite, and my line is favored by the gods. Not your father, most apparently, Assaracus murmured, but Brutus took no notice. And because of my 15 years spent wandering, do you think those years were spent in vain? I have 3 shiploads of seasoned warriors at my back, and these 15 years had made me a seasoned leader of men. And yet further, because my people, my fellow Trojans, are kept here in slavery, I cannot believe they wish to remain so. And finally, do either of you believe that Mesopotamia will escape the fate of so many other cities of our once proud region? Sooner or later, Ariadne's revenge will envelop this city as well. It is time to leave. Now. How? Diomedes said. This talk of freedom is all very well, but how shall it be accomplished? Will you ask Pendrasus for a freedom? Aye, Brutus said. That is what I will do. Bah! Assaracus said. I know Pendrasus, and a prouder man I have never met. He will not let his enslaved workforce just leave. And leave how? Would you have your fellow Trojans walk to wherever you decide to build a new Troy? The land about here is mountainous and treacherous. You have only 3 ships. Diomedes, how many Trojans are there? 7,000. 7,000. I ask you, Brutus, how will you shift 7,000, including women and children, ancients and infants, and all their worldly goods, to a new Troy in some far distant land? I intend to ask Pendrasus for the ships, Brutus said, and grinned at the expressions on the faces of his companions. Listen to me. If I can get Pendrasus to not only agree to allow the Trojans their freedom, but also to provide the ships and provisions for our journey far distant, will you then agree to sail with me? Will you agree that if I accomplish that much, then I have the right to claim my heritage? Assaracus and Diomedes looked at each other. Brutus could see the misgivings in their faces. I am sorry, Diomedes said, but none of this has convinced us that you are the heir of anything but hopes and words. You cannot seriously mean us to believe that you can somehow manage to persuade Pendrasus to grant freedom to his slave force, then manage to get him to donate several score ships so that we may sail to somewhere, a somewhere that the gods will reveal to you in their own sweet time, so that you can build a new Troy? Brutus, I can't possibly. I am the man, Brutus said, his tone very low, and I have the means to accomplish this. The way will be hard, yes, but I can lead the Trojans back into their pride and their heritage. Then prove it, Diomedes snapped, and with something other than words. Brutus stared at him. Then abruptly he again reached for the water and linen cloth and rubbed away at the other kinship bands, revealing their golden splendor. Then he briefly closed his eyes, praying to Artemis for strength. He thought he heard a soft laugh and knew that she was with him. Let me tell you a secret, she whispered into his mind. Ariadne left the game alive, weak and insignificant, in one place only. This is it. If you wish to impress these 2 fools, Then draw on the power of the game, as you were trained. Brutus almost stopped breathing. Draw on the power of the game? Here? Now? I believe in you, she whispered. Do it. Brutus opened his eyes, then made a strange gesture with his right hand that had Didymus suddenly leaning forward in his chair, his eyes sharp with puzzlement. See, Brutus whispered, and with his right hand still open from the gesture it had made, he pointed to the eastern wall of the Andron, where spread the scene of Troy's fall, save that now the scene had shifted, and the mural did not depict Troy's death at all. Instead, it showed a city rising on the far bank of a mighty river. As yet, the city contained little in the way of buildings, save for a magnificent palace atop a mound in the corner. But the walls had been completed in pale dressed stone. They were thick and high, and well fortified semicircular bastions every 20 score of paces. At one end of the city there sat a main gateway, and before this gateway danced 2 long lines of maidens and warriors, holding in their hands flowers and torches. A beautiful black-haired woman led one line, while at the head of the other danced Brutus. I am heir to all that Troy implies, Brutus said softly. All of it. He dropped his hand, and the mural reverted to the old aspect of Troy destroyed. Acericus and Didymus stared a moment longer at the wall, then, very slowly, turned back to face Brutus. It was Didymus who finally spoke. I will speak to my people, he said, his voice a little hoarse, but already I know what they will say. We are with you. Good, said Brutus. He looked at Acericus. And you? I am yours too, Acericus said. Brutus nodded and smiled. Now, these swords that you mentioned. Acericus, of what exactly do they comprise? 2 nights later, as the guards at the gates lay insensible, well drugged with the wine Acericus had sent down earlier, a group of some 300 men, well armed and armored, slipped out of the city. Acericus was at their head, and Didymus, leader of the enslaved Trojans, as well as several score of Trojan men, their hair cropped close to their skulls to lose their hated mark of slavery, ran among Acericus' mercenaries. They exited the city, then turned onto the road that led east to the steep, forested Acron gorges. There, silently and patiently, awaited the bulk of Brutus' warriors. Behind him, Acericus left a Trojan population holding their collective breath and hope, and a small but courageous boy on his way to Pindrasus' palace to deliver a modest roll of parchment wrapped in pristine linen. Thus ends Chapter 8. Till next time.